Okay, today's lesson we're going to simplify some exponent expressions. Here we go. X to the power of 3 times x to the power of 8, okay? So I make two lines. Now, if you don't have a line, you make one and everything's going to be on top, okay? So on top you have an x to the third, x to the sixth, so the two factors are x's. Well, there's two of them, so I go 3 plus 6, and that's 9. Can't be simplified. X to the ninth is as good as it can get. Okay, in my next problem, we have y times y to the power of 6. So, all the factors are y, so you got a 1. You don't do the in out when it's not, you don't multiply, you only multiply if it's inside of a parentheses, plus 1 plus 6. 1 plus 1 plus 6 is 8, y to the 8th. Okay, next one, we have a parentheses, and inside the parentheses we have m to the 4th and then a second power outside. Both of those are powers. So you only have one factor, m. But it's to the 4th, but it's in parentheses, so we do the inside-outside multiplication. It's 8, so m to the 8th. Okay, next one, we have a parentheses. Inside we have 4y. Outside we have a power of 4. I'm circling the powers, so put in the operator. It's 4 times y. Okay, so we have 4. It's to the first in parentheses, 1 times 4 is 4. Y to the first, 1 times 4, 4. And we can definitely simplify 4 to the 4th. That would be 4 times 4 times 4 times 4, which would turn that into 256 times y to the 4th. Okay, and this one, parentheses, 5x to the 3rd to the 4th times 3x to the 3rd. So, again, parentheses. Inside you have 5x to the 3rd and then a 4th power outside times 3x to the 3rd. Okay, so inside you got 5 times x times 3 times x. So I got 5x, 3, and x. So I go 5 times x times 3. I do not repeat the x. So 5 to the first. So inside, outside, 1 times 4 is 4. Now there are two factors of x, so you need to be looking at both of them. Do the one on the left first, then the one on the right. So we have x to the third, but it's in a parentheses, so 3 times 4 is 12 plus, and then the 3. So 12 plus 3 makes 15, 15, x to the 15th. Then 3 to the first, okay? You do not need to multiply it because it's not in a parentheses, it's just 1. Do not take 1 times 3, that's not inside of parentheses. Okay, so we have 5 to the 4th, which can be simplified. X to the 15th can't, 3 to the 1st definitely can. So 5 to the 4th is 5 times 5 times 5 times 5, and then 3 to the 1st is just 3. So the 5 times 5 times 5 times 5 is 625. So this is now replaced with 625, and then that just becomes 3. And then times x to the 15th. Okay, now can you multiply anything? You can. You can take 625 times 3. That product can be found. It's 1,875 times x to the 15th. Okay. All right here we have a parentheses, and inside of the parentheses we have 5y to the 2nd and then a 4th outside, times parentheses 3y to the 2nd and a 3rd outside. Okay. Okay, so on top 5 times y times 3 times y. So you have a 5, a y, a 3, and then a second y. Don't write a second y. So 5 is to the first. 1 times 4 is 4. Now there are two, when I get to the y, know that you have two factors. So you need to find the left and the right. So this y here was to the 2, but it's in parentheses, so 2 times 4 is 8. And this y here is a 2. 2 times 3 is 6. 8 plus 6 is 14. Okay, then the 3 to the first in parentheses, 1 times 3 is 3. Okay, so out of all these, 5 to the 4th can be simplified. Y to the 14th cannot. Okay, 3 to the 3rd can be simplified. So 5 to the 4th is 5 times 5 times 5 times 5. 3 to the 3rd is 3 times 3 times 3. So that equals 625. And then 3 times 3 times 3 is 27. So we have 65, or 625, my bad, 625, multiplied by 27. And then times y to the 14th. Okay, you can find that product there, 625 times 27. So 16,875. Times y to the 14th. Okay, now the next one, we have x to the 14th divided by x to the 13th. So again, now I start having some things on the bottom. So you focus on the top. On top you got x to the power of 14. That's a 14 I just circled. Okay, can't really see it, it's blurry. So you got x, powers of 14, it's not in parentheses. Now look on the bottom, x to the 13th. So you got x with a 13. So what we ought to do now, now that we start having some factors on the bottom, you see, gee, do I have x on top? Yes. So I take out the smaller exponent. Wherever the smaller one is gets taken out. 14 minus 13 is 1. So it'd be x to the power of 1. Or just x. Okay, my next problem. We have a parentheses. Inside we have a division line. On top of the division line we have x. On the bottom we have y. And outside the parentheses we have a 4th power. Okay, so the only factor on top is an x. It's to the 1st power, but it's in a parentheses, so you do the in-out multiplication. 1 times 4 is 4. Then on bottom you got y. Do the in-out multiplication. 1 times 4 is 4. You can't cross them out now because they're different factors. Okay, y is on top, bottom, and 8 on top. Well, we can't simplify x to the 4th. We can't simplify y to the 4th, so I guess that's going to stay the way it is. X to the 4th over y to the 4th. Okay, next problem. We have a parentheses. Inside you got a division line, and on top of the division line you have 7a to the 2nd power. On bottom you have 4b to the 3rd power, and after the parentheses is closed you have a 3rd power. So those are your exponents. A 2nd, a 3rd, and a 3rd. Okay, now on top you have 7 times a. Okay, so 1 times 3 is 3. And then 2 times 3 is 6. Okay, on bottom you have 4 times b. So 4 to the 1, 1 times 3 is 3. Then b, 3 times 3 is 9. Now you have a 4 on bottom, you got 1 on top? No. You have a b on top? No. So nothing can be crossed out. So on top, 7 to the 3rd can simplify. The a to the 6 cannot. So 7 times 7 times 7 equals 343. And the a to the 6 just stays the same. And nothing can be multiplied there. Okay, now in our denominator, 4 to the 3rd, that can be simplified. The b to the 9th cannot. So 4 times 4 times 4 is 64. So this is out, 64 is in on bottom. B to the ninth can't be simplified. And then I can't multiply anything. That's your final product or answer. Okay, my next problem, you have a parentheses. Inside you have a division line. Now on top of that division line you have 4x to the second. Under the division line you have a 3. Then the parentheses is closed and you have a second power, a times dot, and then you have 2 over a fraction line with 2 on top, x third on bottom, x to the third. So second, third. Those are the exponents I had to start with. Now when you have two fractions, remember that rule that you can combine it into one if it's multiplication times. So let's talk about the top. We got 4 times x times 2. Okay. All those need to be accounted for. So 4, this is my only factor of 4. Okay. So 1 times 2 is 2. X, this is my only factor of x. Remember, I'm not looking at bottom. 2, you got to do the in out. 2 times 2 is 4. Then at 2, this is my only factor of 2 on top. It's just to the first. I do not do the in out multiplication if it's not in a parentheses. Now bottom, you just have 3 and x. Now this is my only 3. It's to the first. I need to multiply it though, in out, 1 times 2 is 2. Even though it's on bottom, the parentheses also surrounds the bottom. And x to the third. Now you have a 3 on bottom, you got a 3 on top? No. You have an x on bottom, you got 1 on top? Yes sir. So you get rid of the smaller one and subtract 3 from the larger. 4 minus 3 is 1. Okay, so on top we have 4 to the second, x to the first, 2 to the first. We can simplify the 4 to the second and the 2 to the first. So 4 times 4 is 16. 2 to the first would just be 2. So this becomes a 16. This 2 to the first becomes 2, and then the variable factor just trails. Now I can multiply 16 by 2. We need to do that. 16 times 2 is 32. So there's your top. Now we go to the bottom. The only factor I have is 3 to the second. We can figure that out. 3 times 3 equals 9. So 9. And you don't do anything else. 32 times x to the first over 9. Okay, my next problem. We have a parentheses. And inside we have a division line. On top we have 4y to the third power. On bottom we have just y. Outside parentheses you have a fourth power. Times. Then we have another parentheses. On top you have 2y to the second. On bottom you have x. Then you have a fourth power. So we combine that into 1. So we have 4 times y times 2 times y. So if I ask you what the factors are at top are, you go 4y, 2y. But we just want to write 4 times y times 2. So let's talk about the 4. It's to the first. If you put a 1 there, if it doesn't have an exponent, then we take 1 times 4. That's 4. Now, when you get to the y, remember we have 2y factors to find. The one on the left is to the third, but we got to do the in-out multiplication. 3 times 4 is 12. Plus 2 times 4 is 8. 12 plus 8 is 20. So that ends up to the 20th power. Okay, then 2. The 2 would be to the first here. 1 times 4 is 4. Now go to the bottom. You have 2. Now you start the process over. You just have a y and an x. So y is to the first. 1 times 4 is 4. X is to the first. 1 times 4 is 4. Okay, so you have y on bottom. Do you have y on top? Y fourth, y 20th. Obviously, you're going to get rid of the y to the fourth. Okay, 20 minus 4 is 16. So that would be y to the 16th power. You have x fourth on bottom. Do you have a factor of x on top? No, you don't. Okay, so you have 4 to the fourth, y to the 16th, 2 to the fourth. So for the fourth, 4 times 4 times 4 times 4 is 256. 2 to the fourth, 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 is 16. So this changes into 256, and this changes into 16, and then y to the fourth. Okay. Now we can actually multiply 256 by 16. 4096. Okay. And then in the denominator you have x to the fourth. Okay, down to 2 problems. We have a parentheses. Inside we have a division line. On top we have 7 a to the second, b to the fifth. On bottom we have 3a to the third. And there's a second power outside. Okay, 7 a to the second, b to the fifth. Under the line, 3a to the third. There's a second outside. Okay, so factors on top, 7 times d times b. Okay, alright, so 1 times 2, that's going to be 2. Or it's times a, d, what am I talking about? It's 7a and b. Okay. And then on D, 2 times A, 2 times 2 is 4. Then on B, 5 times 2 is 10. Okay. Now, in the denominator, we have 3 times A. Now, those are still in parentheses, so whatever exponent I have to do the inside-outside. So 1 times 2 is 2. And 3 times 2 is 6. So you have a factor of 3 on bottom. Do you have any factors of 3 on top? No. A to the 6, a to the 4th. So the a to the 4th is the one to get rid of. That's the smaller one. And then 6 minus 4 is 2. So a2. Okay, so we have 7 to the second and 3 to the second. So 7 times 7 is 49. You can't simplify b to the 10th, and there's nothing there to multiply by. 3 to the second would be 3 times 3, and that's 9. And then that a to the second power will just stay the same, 9 times a to the second. So 49 times b to the 10th over 49 times a to the second. Okay, and last problem. On top of the first fraction, or division line, you have 8x to the third, y to the fourth, and under the division line you have xy. Then times. Then a parentheses on top you have 4xy. And under the line you have x to the third, y to the second, with a 2 outside. Okay. Now you need to underline that. So factors, you got 8 times x, x times y. And then 4 times x, x times y. Okay. So you have 8xy, 4xy. So we're going to go 8 times x times y times 4. And we stop at 4 because after the 4 it's just repeats. Okay. So 8's to the 1, not in parentheses, so I do not apply the inside outside. It will just be a 1. Now, how many factors of x are there on top? 1, 2. So we do the 1 on the left first. 3 there, we don't multiply. But this x is to the first, that we need to do the in-out multiplication now. 1 times 2 is 2, so 3 plus 2 is 5. Okay, now y. We have 2 factors of y. Y. Y here, you have 4. Don't do the in-out. Plus, and the other factor y is to the 1, so 1 times 2 is 2. So 4 plus 2 is 6. Okay, then the 4, that's a 1. 1 times 2 is 2. Okay. Now at bottom, factors, you have x times y, x, y. So you go just x times y. You have 2 of each of them, though. So you got a 1, no multiplication, plus the other x, you got a 3, but that's in parentheses, so you got to do the in out. 3 times 2 is 6. So 1 plus 6 is 7. Then the y, you got 2 of those as well. So the first is to the first. Once again, there's no parentheses around that, so I just put a 1. And then this y to the second, that's in parentheses, so you do the inside-outside multiplying. 2 times 2 is 4, so 1 plus 4 is 5. Now, anything you can cross out, well, yeah, I got an x on top and bottom, so the x to the 5th goes away, and then we subtract 5 from the 7. 7 minus 5 then is 2. Then y6, y5, the y to the 5th goes away, okay? And we subtract 5 from 6. 6 minus 5 is 1, okay? Y to the 1. So on top we have 8 to the first, y to the first, 4 to the second. We can simplify the 8 to the first and the 4 to the second. So the 8 to the first is just 8. The 4 to the second would be 4 times 4, which would be 16. So this becomes 8, and this factor here becomes 16. And then this factor here, y to the first, just trails, okay? Now on bottom we have x to the second, but that can't, by the x to the second. Now on top you need to find the product and multiply 8 by 16. 8 times 16 is 128. Okay, and that she is simplified.